welcome to the HR Exchange podcast. My name is David Rice. I'm the editor of the HR Exchange Network and your host for all of these podcasts. On today's show, we're going to be chatting with Regis Cortamanche. He is the Director of Knowledge and Learning at the American Civil Liberties Union, also known as the ACLU. We're going to be talking a little bit about some of the challenges he's faced since joining the organization back in July, what the year has been like for the ACLU, and just kind of what some of his goals for the future are, as well as some advice from his career that he's picked up along the way. But before we get started, I do want to kind of remind everyone that if you're enjoying these videos, please do subscribe to the channel or put a like on the video. All of that helps us get the content out there to more people. So we really do appreciate any subscriptions or feedback on the videos. Also, I would encourage you to go ahead and go over to HR Exchange Network and subscribe to our newsletter. You can get all of our content from the website, articles, market reports, the latest webinars and online events info in that newsletter. Every Tuesday it goes out. So I do encourage everyone to sign up for that if you want more from the HR Exchange Network. Just visit hrexchangenetwork.com and sign up. All right, with all that said, next week is Christmas, so I want to wish everyone a happy holidays, and we are going to be off for that, so don't expect a new episode next week. However, the following week, we'd like to put out another episode if possible. We'd like to do something around New Year's resolutions, and so I'm asking everyone, I'd like to make this a little bit kind of user-centric or audience-centric, so a little participation here. If you have a New Year's resolution related to your work in HR, please do share it. Just record a little voice memo on your phone and send it to editor@hrexchangenetwork.com. I'll give them all a listen, and I'll pick some of the best responses that we get and put them into an episode set to come out around New Year's. So if you can do that, that would be awesome. And we appreciate any participation that we get. So with all that out of the way, I'm just going to play this interview with Regis for you. It is a bit of a shorter one this week. I think it's getting towards the end of the year. We all need our break. So I didn't want to make like a big, long thing towards the end of the year, but it's a good interview, and I think you'll enjoy it. So enjoy. All right, so in working with the ACLU, you have a unique challenge in terms of distributing learning across a nationwide network of affiliates. So I imagine you all were set up from an infrastructure point of view in terms of getting that learning out there. That's something that I know a lot of people in L&D had to shift to because they weren't necessarily ready for something like this. But has your approach to reaching and kind of engaging learners changed at all through this, kind of evolved through the COVID experience?
Clearly, no one knew what was coming this year, but getting people together for large in-person events was never something that was easy or cost-effective to pull off, right? And although that does build community, there's a lot of benefits to doing that. The remote learning is just something that, or virtual learning is something that we've always been doing, right? It's interesting at the ACLU, so I've been there since July, and formal L&D is really a new thing, if you can believe it. And there's been a good degree of role-specific training, compliance training, but not really a universal professional development or even onboarding program approach, right? So it's been a massive year of change for everyone, but especially the ACLU in many ways, not just externally and what the ACLU is dealing with as an organization, but internally, like who are we as an organization? How are we investing in our employees? And how are we deepening engagement and retention at the organization? So a lot of kind of newish questions that have been brought up to the fore. But to answer your question specifically, we've shifted to all virtual programming. We've tested non-Zoom platforms because honestly, people just can't be on another Zoom, no matter how great that Zoom is. It's like another Zoom meeting, right? And novelty goes a really long way right now. Variety is the spice of life. So we've tested Hop-In to make it feel more like an event, to like a well-produced event. We've created Slack channels and informal ways for people to connect. We've also ramped up on-demand learning, and typically I would use something like a LinkedIn Learning to complement programs that we already have, but without many of those programs being built, we've launched it as a turnkey way for folks to choose their own learning adventure. I don't care if you want to learn piano or you want to learn how to discuss race at work, right? And we've created learning paths in there, but we're seeing tons of engagement with it because people are home. We saw a big spike over the holidays, actually, over Thanksgiving. People were at home like, oh, I want to deal with this specific issue or learn how to, use Photoshop, right? And we've also created learning communities for role-based or issue-based conversations across our affiliates to take place more informally as well. So it's definitely a very user-centric approach, on demand or in virtual 100% right now.
All right. And obviously the ACLU's goals, its mission and its goals, so to speak, are they're important not only for the organization but kind of society as a whole. I would say, and when you're supporting that through organizational learning, how do you focus it in a way for the individual to develop how they want? You mentioned there you've got these personalized things, like people want to learn how to use Photoshop, they want to learn these specific skills, so you're helping them develop how they want, but how do you keep that so that it's still helping the organization as a whole move toward its goals?
Mm. Yeah, thank you for that view, by the way, on the ACLU. And some non-government organizations work on one issue, right? So if you have like a Planned Parenthood, of course, within that issue, there's lots of sub-issues, but it's really just one overall issue, right? At the ACLU, we have about 14 waterfront issues that we're focused on. And I will never be the one that trains lawyers. I don't have that expertise, right? But I can empower the people who are with the tools and resources that they need based on our homegrown design principles about what makes effective learning stick, right? Running Train the Trainers is something we're doing. And we all know that training itself isn't learning. So I'm implementing spaced reinforced learning. There's a bit of an old school model here with a lot of one and done events, and how do we think about this more programmatically so people can try things on between learning experiences in the real world and then coming back and sharing those learnings. So doing retrospectives and debriefs on things versus just going on to the next, which again is based on the urgency of the work. It happens quite often here. And then every state has different focus areas as well. And we have 54 EDs, executive directors, which are basically 54 CEOs. So identifying what are the universal needs that they have, but how can we give them the tools to tailor those for their individual state specific needs, like onboarding, for example. It's going to look different in Georgia than it is in Texas, right? And I'll never understand that better than they do. So how do I give them the tools that they can fill in the blanks with, which just don't exist to this point? And hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, and as we were coming into this, that was something that I was thinking about. I was like, the needs of folks working in Mississippi are certainly much different than those in California. So, um, it was an interesting year to say the least, in the realm of politics, civil rights, human rights, and these are things that the ACLU touches on. And so, what were some of the challenges in developing learning content in a year like this that kind of resonated with people, at this time?
And these have always been issues, right? But there's, in my lifetime, there hasn't been a year like this, right? Among many other things, there's been a lot of social unrest this year. And the ACLU is a nonpartisan organization, but the attacks this nation has seen on civil rights and civil liberties in recent history is unprecedented in my lifetime again, right? So it's led to a very busy year for the ACLU, but like a really tiring year for employees, right? Who are out there, some literally on the front lines of all this. And so we've just led with a high degree of empathy. People are not okay, right? And we have to name that and be okay with that. If people need a nap in the middle of the day, great, take your nap, right? If you're late for a meeting because your kid is having tough tech difficulties, like my son just was in the next room, don't come to the meeting, right? Learning is just one lever that we can pull to show employees that we care about them and are invested in their success. And in partnership with our EDIB team, we approach everything in a very thoughtful way to make sure that we're not just forcing the issues, but creating psychological safety, not only in training, but in working group meetings, one-on-ones, team meetings? What are those everyday interactions that people are having? And how are we creating safety and space for people to be okay or not okay, right? And bottom line, ultimately, to answer your question, we need to meet people where they are, wherever they are is okay. I'm not going to force people to come to things that they aren't able to for whatever reason. And uh, but ultimately, if we're designing a learning program, speaking to people's pain in a thoughtful way is a great way for them to come. So if people are feeling overwhelmed, burned out, frustrated, talk about that when you're marketing your time management class, right? For
Yeah.
example, if you're part of an underrepresented community within the organization, talk about that and what you're doing to support them in this time, right? And be authentic, have adult to adult conversations, um, and don't, and again, just meet people where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great HR mindset to have in your L&D approach. That's I like that. Yeah, you've had some interesting stops along the way in your career. It's we've seen AOL, Yahoo, BuzzFeed. So I was kind of curious, if you could tell us what are some of the experiences that you've had along the way that you carry with you in your work today, and that you
Hmm.
find that are kind of timeless lessons.
Yeah, sure. I've had a lot of hits, a lot of misses, right? And certainly a few mantras that I bring into almost any organization based on what I've learned. And I think the first one is to oil the squeaky wheels, right? One of those orgs you mentioned was pretty risk averse, and we had one of the offices in Baltimore were learning champions, right? And I would invest a lot of the learning budget into the Baltimore office because although I couldn't win some of the battles in the other offices, they were really into it. And because of that, it grew a lot of word of mouth marketing, grassroots uh, learning culture was grown from there, and it emanated to the other offices, and then was able to help me influence in other ways. So I think finding your learnatics, right, your learning champions, go there first. And I'm doing that at the ACLU, who are the states and the executive directors that really love this stuff, and I'm going to show impact with them. And then hopefully that everybody else follows suit. I think being authentic to the culture is really important. And I learned that at BuzzFeed specifically. Our financial learning series was called How to Adult. And although that title might not work at other organizations, I think what's in it for people, what's in the whole WIFM approach, right? Um, Marketing goes a long way. And I think being authentic to the culture and speaking the voice of the employees that work there and reflecting that tone in an authentic way, not like, hey kids, like come to this cool training session, like riding in on a skateboard, that's not authentic to me, right?
No.
Maybe it was 25 years ago, but it's certainly not now. So, but I think speaking to the having the same tone of voice as your organization, I found that people problems are universal as well. Managers aren't great like anywhere, right? And although you might not understand the culture that I'm new to the nonprofit space, but I do know that most managers need support and help. I do know that onboarding is important, right, for many, many, many reasons. And so those are the people problems that aren't universal, and how do you approach those in a way that also does reflect the culture when you're building out your programs. And then finally, just done is better than perfect. You'll never get consensus. Just build things, iterate on them, adapt, and show impact as you move.
Yeah, I live by that old George Patton quote: "Perfection is the enemy of results."
Totally.
um, so as we look ahead to 2021, what are some of the goals, the things that you hope will become more goals that you have for L&D, or that you hope to see become more widespread for L&D as an industry?
It's a great question. My last organization, I worked at a learning consultancy across a wide range of industries, and the theme that I observed is that people are incredibly process focused, right? So if they're running a performance management program, if they want to roll out performance management, for example, they think about the system, they think about the ratings, right? And they're not very user centric. They're not asking the right questions. So to answer your question, I think user centricity, almost taking a UX design approach to L&D, What do you want people to think, feel, and do? A better question for performance management specifically is not how do we rate people so that we know how well they're doing. A better question is how do you build self-efficacy and enable people to do their best work. Build a performance management program around that, and it's going to be much more successful than implementing ratings, right? The second thing I would say there is how do we build communities with learning? These are all basic things, very just user, it's always user-centric to me, right? How do we empower the people in your organization to drive learning versus the L&D or HR teams doing it? When it's working, people don't even really know who you are, versus forcing them to come to this training session. That to me isn't learning. How do you build that empowering, continuous learning across the organization that is happening without you having to deliver every program? And so getting away from those one and done events, really thinking about immersive, contextual, space learning, and empowering the people who are the subject matter experts in your organization is something that I've seen work well. It's easier said than done, but again, it always comes back to how people learn.
So one of the things I'm asking listeners to do is to send us their New Year's resolutions, and so
I
I
know
kind of
those
want
never
to.
work though, David. Like,
No, I know, but we all have
best
them.
laid
It's sort
plans,
of
yeah.
it's just a ritual.
Sure.
So if you had to make a New Year's resolution for your work, what would it be and why?
For my work, so it's not the lose 20 pounds.
No, because
okay,
I fail that every year. So
yeah, exactly same. So work is an unnatural environment, and people that wouldn't necessarily hang out together are forced to work together, right? And if I can help people thrive in that environment, I'm doing my work, right? I feel good about that. I think the resolution would be specifically for the ACLU staff to do their best work and maybe even have fun doing it. The work they do it's very serious stuff, right? And it affects people's actual lives. And you can feel the weight of that work in almost every meeting that you're in. But how do we help people find micro joys in their work, right? It doesn't mean you have to be laughing and be overly saccharine, as somebody once called me, right? But how do you find those little delights? And that can happen in team meetings, right? In those small interactions that we're not getting at the water cooler anymore. That used to mean a lot to me personally, but injecting those into our day-to-day, because I believe that when you are enjoying the work, you do a better job, right? So how can I help people do that, right? Thrive in their environment while also having a little bit of fun. I would feel good about 2021 if I was able to do that.
Yeah, it sounds good. I think everybody can get on board for that. Well, thank you for giving us a little bit of your time today. I really appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thanks, David. I appreciate it. The conversation.
All right.